We're once again holding a meeting that's being live streamed and recorded. So please stay out of camera range if you want to be anonymous. As a result of the skill and ability of Oakmont Video Production, we know a recording will be available on the website as quickly as possible after tonight's meeting. So if you want to go back and check anything that you think you saw, or that you think you heard, or that you think you missed, please make use of the online capability to see that recorded information. I apologize. My name is John Taylor. I'm a member of the Board of Directors. Actually, they say I should tell you that I'm president of the Board of Directors. But the fact is, I'm just trying to be the moderator and part of the reporting for tonight's meeting. I apologize for the lack of introduction. One other announcement. The nominating committee for OVA director elections is now looking for candidates. And the committee chair is here tonight, Kathleen Conley. Please stand up, Kathleen, so you can see you. She'd be glad to have you talk with us. We'll have a question period at the conclusion of the several presentations. We want to record each question to aid us in our further research and decision making. So when the questions start, we'll bring you one of these microphones, and we hope you'll wait till the microphone gets there to start your question, because we want to be able to keep track of every part of questions that are asked. Hopefully, you not only picked up the handouts that the First Things First group were providing for you before you came in the door, but that you also got the handouts that show what our program is for tonight. We wanted you to have that, not only to know what we're planning to talk about, but also it's blank on the back if you want to make a note or two. You also should find a handout about the December 29th information that we shared regarding what I consider our successful meeting with the Hunter Group people about giving us a breather and taking some additional time to make important decisions. We previously reported to the community on the board's December 11th executive session. We had a thorough discussion of matters related to the Meadow annexation and capital contribution agreement. And as a result, we initiated a request to meet with Mr. Ben Van Zupsen, the Meadow developer, who started his site grading work out on the corner around the gas station. I should say the former gas station in Suffolk. That meeting took place on December the 18th, and a copy of the board's report on the outcome of those discussions has been posted on the OVA website and was also a handout that we had for you here tonight. As you may then have read, the most immediately significant outcome of the meeting with Mr. Van Zupsen was an agreement that it would be mutually beneficial to extend OVA's timing for construction alternative planning. The developer does not want to indicate a specific length of delay at this point, but he was clear on a desire to work with us to allow OVA to fully address community concerns and options. He commented that as developers, they also have schedule challenges. In simple terms, we have breathing room that we did not anticipate in order to make our decisions. With that bit of an introduction, I'll begin tonight's extensive report. It's been assembled to try and fully respond to resident comments that say we feel overwhelmed about the proposed major construction project and would like more information and background. So this is the effort tonight to fill that gap. Over the past 11 years, successive OVA boards have pursued development of administration facilities. This report makes no claims that that committee, staff, director research work, or what have you, has gone as far as it should, or that actions along the way were good, right, wrong. The quest for appropriate OVA offices has been an on-again and off-again process, and I choose to characterize it as a quest because research for this report tonight reveals the extensive amount of residents' volunteer time and energy invested in the process of planning, dialogue, activity group discussions, stakeholder research, outreach for second opinions, meeting on site at Oakmont Gardens, and investigating how other senior communities are designed. In addition, a variety of professional guidance has been involved. In fact, significant OBA funds have now been spent 3 times trying to effectively focus on the goal of our own offices here in the central facilities. My personal opinion is it's therefore about time that we decide on what we want to do, if we want to do anything, and stop spending money that doesn't prove to provide a benefit. The original OVA offices, for those of you that weren't here when they lived there, was in the corner of this original building. The building on the right was Mr. Berger's Golf Pro Shop, his initial sales office. It had a little coffee shop in it at one time and so forth. But the offices, after Mr. Berger stopped using it as a sales office, were located in that corner of the building that you can see circled in red. The association's quest for office of our own began in the spring of 2000, when our original cramped offices were moved out of this corner location and into leased space on Laurel Leaf Place. This was done to make room for a computer learning center in these original OVA office as part of the activity building that was where the offices were located. And as the number of Oakmont residents and the termination of the developer's administrative agreement meant more things had to be done by the OVA office, they needed more space. We are, of course, glad to advance to an era of having a computer learning center. So here is the Laurel Leaf location that some of you will remember that we moved to. This location was leased space while we planned for another office building. And the first documented record of a search for permanent office buildings was found in the hands of Santa Rosa architects Tierney and Figueredo in January of 2002. And here's a chart that shows the overall layout that they proposed in 2002. And so up here is where we actually ended up building a maintenance building. And here was what they were proposing as a 4,800 square foot meeting and office building. They actually ended up preparing construction drawings for a maintenance building, and you don't really have to see the details of this. The building got built. But the design of the 4,800 square foot central building on the grass in front of those old original buildings is interesting, because at that time the area marked in red on this chart was to be permanent OBA offices. Just above it was to be a large library, because at that time the library was located over here in the leased space next to the OBA offices. And to the left was to be a large theater-style meeting room. That was the plan that we paid for in 2002. The offices stayed in the Laurel Leaf location until 2010. Thank you. losing track for a moment. I'm trying to follow a script so that I be sure and say what I intend to say and give you the best information we've been able to collect. These plans that I've just been showing you were prepared as part of OVA's initial negotiations for development of houses at the orchard. The agreement included provisions for 2 construction alternative projects. They provided the developer a choice to pay a portion of the orchard impact fees through construction of 2 OVA capital improvements. The 1,500 square foot maintenance building that I pointed out on an earlier chart was built by the Hunter Group under this construction alternative provision. Its construction began in mid-2005 when orchard home building began, 6 months before any homes had been sold in the orchard. The maintenance building was completed in March of 2006 for a builder credit of $203,193.51 and completed 6 months before the OVA would have accumulated enough cash for home sales from impact fees to start building for ourselves. That was the benefit the association at that time saw from a construction alternative. The second construction alternative for the 4,800 square building was not implemented, and the reasons for that are not clear. But the next step in OVA's quest for offices was seen in the fall of 2006. The 2002 plans drawn up by Tierney and Figueredo were set aside in favor of recommendations by the then Long Range Planning Committee that resulted from detailed resident and activity group meetings, along with research done by Archeologics on OVA's overall facility needs. A much larger project was proposed as a result of that development, and it focused on reconstructing and remodeling 7,000 square feet of the original 2 activity center buildings, including the fitness center area, and an addition of almost 10,000 square feet of new construction. A significant part of the new construction was for OVA offices, and this slide shows just a part of that 10,000 square foot proposal, but it does show the footprint for what was then proposed as a 2,300 square foot offices. And I think you can pretty clearly see that it included the kinds of things that we now expect our OVA offices to do. Additional resident meetings in early 2007 and a study of financing requirements for this larger construction project and preliminary discussions with city staff led to the board's decision to reduce the size of that project. OVA offices would be dropped from the new construction and remain in leased space, but 2 meeting rooms would be added in that leased space, being vacated by the move out of the library into new space in the Central Activity Center. When the Laurel Leaf lease came up for renewal in 2010, an agreement with Benson Properties could not be worked out. A lease for more suitable space at less cost was signed with Dr. Eric Prout, owner of the Oakmont Medical Building, and the floor plan for the offices that we located to there looks like this. And there's some important things about those dimensions that I hope you will understand. Up here it says those are 2,080 square feet. The 2,080 square feet shown is simply the inside measurement of the staff workroom, this larger meeting room, and this small meeting room. We paid just for the space that we occupy, without any overhead percentage for lobby, hallways, toilets, parking lot, or landscaping. The lease has provisions for a 3-year extension in 2015 and an additional 2-year extension in 2018. But the OVA's quest and board goals for more appropriate, readily accessible, centrally located, and properly sized facilities went on. In the October 23rd, 2012 report and recommendations, again by the then Long Range Planning Committee, it says the current office lease is the least expensive OVA option in the short term, but space doesn't meet staff requirements. They went on to say that storage facilities are inadequate. Purchasing or building an office would probably be the best long-term solution for the association. Based on this long-range planning report, the board asked to have the work of the Long Range Planning Committee merged with the team that was negotiating possible annex agreement changes with the meadow developer. Wendy Lalonde, who spearheaded the Long Range Planning Committee report, joined Pat Amadeo and Bob Giddings in that effort. So I think this is a good point, before introducing them, to share with you two definitions that may not be common for everyone's understanding. And that has to do with the terms annexation and capital contribution. The payment of impact fees to build homes that become part of Oakmont are officially titled capital contributions. They have been a very substantial source of funds for our building projects, and they're unique to Oakmont. Mr. Berger voluntarily initiated the concept by placing $100 in a capital improvement account when each house he built was sold. This was in addition to his construction of the Central and West Recreation Center. Mr. Gallagher built the East Recreation Center and increased the capital contribution to $200 for each house he sold. The Berger and Gallagher interests in Oakmont's further development were over when it came time to consider annexing undeveloped property along the entrance at Oakmont Drive and along the Pythian Road entrance. At that time, OBA negotiated directly with cobblestone builders for annexation of Quail Run into the association. And the impact fees that were negotiated for each house in cobblestone in the Quail Run development was $5,500, quite a change from the $200. But more recently, we got smarter. The Orchard annexation agreement, which was signed in 2002, just about 8 years after the Quail Run, had a much larger initial fee, plus it had a consumer price index factor. With these fees, they started at $11,871 per house sold and are now up to $14,649.21 as a result of the CPI increase. This same concept was an underlying element of negotiations with Mr. Carinali for the development he planned for the meadows. Pat Amadeo has played an important role in negotiating these annexation agreements, so we asked her to provide some background regarding the nuances of OBA and developer interest faced in these negotiations, both with Mr. Carinali and later with Mr. Van Zupsik. Pat's work started with the 2002-2005 agreements, but I've listed all 4 of these agreements on this chart so that you can have a picture of how many there really are. So Pat, may I turn this over to you and ask you to share your experience and comments with us?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Pat Amadeo, and let me try to be as brief and as simple as possible because I know a lot of you are interested in getting to more of the nuts and bolts. But I think this little history is probably interesting. In 2007, Clem Carinelli, who was the owner of the Meadows, wanted to renegotiate the annexation agreement on that property. The OBA board asked me to chair an ad hoc committee to work with Mr. Carinelli. Their direction at the time was identical to the direction I received again in 2012. Any change to the annexation agreement must result in a benefit to our community of equal or greater value than the existing agreement. At the time, Mr. Carinelli had been trying unsuccessfully for several years to find a buyer to build an assisted living facility on an acre and a half located within the Meadows property that was and still is zoned for this specific use. It's a different and more restrictive zoning than the single-family residential on the balance of the property and the 3 areas designated for commercial use. He wanted to change the acre and a half to single-family and include it with the balance of the residential as he designed plans for that area. In exchange for our support before the City Council, our negotiating committee proposed, and Mr. Carinelli agreed, to pay all the impact fees or capital construction fees up front. Currently, we receive them each time a house goes into escrow. At the time, that totaled about $500,000. It has risen now, based, as John said, on the Consumer Price Index. This was at the height of the recession, and we had been very slow to receive impact fees for the orchard, as we had to wait for each house, as I said, to go into escrow. Planning on when we would receive the monies was, and still is, difficult to project, and the board unanimously concurred that a single upfront payment was indeed an improvement to the existing agreement at the Meadows. Ultimately, Mr. Carinelli never pursued the change in the designation, but the new annexation agreement was in effect. Fast forward now to fall of 2012. The Hunter Group, developers at the orchard, and now the new owners of the Meadows property approached the association to ask us to consider changing the Meadows annexation and capital construction agreement. The board then asked me as chair of the Oakmont Community Development Committee to form a subcommittee to meet with Mr. Van Zuten for discussions. We were to negotiate on the basis, once again, of trying to find a change that would be as good or better for Oakmont. When we met, the Hunter interests told us that an upfront payment of more than $500,000 would make it impossible for them to develop residences on the property. They also told us their development interests were limited to the possible building of 36,000 houses. They would be independently marketing the parcels zoned for assisted living, that acre and a half, and the commercial parcels. These discussions led ultimately to an agreement for a construction alternative that is in place today following the board's approval last February. And I used as a model the original agreement on the orchard, which had construction alternatives, which ultimately led to the maintenance building. Members of our committee included Bob Giddings, John Taylor, both of OCDC, and Wendy Lahand from the Long Range Planning Committee. Most recently, I joined with John Taylor and Cassie Turner, our new manager, in meeting with the Hunter Group to determine if any extensions to the deadlines reflected in the agreement could be negotiated, and the extent to which other changes were possible. As John indicated, they're really very willing to work with the OVA.
Thank you, Pat, not only for your report tonight, but for your work over a long period of time to provide continuity and direction in these negotiations. Now we want to ask Wendy Lalonde and Bob Giddings to describe details related to the research done by the Oakmont Community Development Committee Long Range Planning Committee team, searching for potential building sites, not just on our central property, but at other locations we might find.
Building sites researched. Space requirements now providing options for the future. Sites we might want to buy, sites we already own. We started by developing a description of the space needed now. We used the dimensions of our present leased space, listed its limitations as shown on this chart, and came up with a requirement for approximately 2,930 square feet.
Go back. Go back. Go back. Go back.
Recommended administration and meeting room spaces and size. The current offices, conferences, and meeting rooms are 2,080 square feet. Additional requirements included men's and women's toilets for 200 square feet, record storage and supply rooms for 150 square feet, enlarged staff break room for 50 square feet, a lobby accessible when the office is closed for 200 square feet, enlarged and reshaped meeting room for 100 square feet, and hallways for 100 square feet, for a total of 2,930 square feet. This resulted in our conclusion that continuing to integrate administration space with meeting room facilities in a permanent building offered significant potential flexibility for the future. Options for the future. Combining our current need for administration and meeting room facilities in a permanent building provides space that could be economically converted to meet a potential future need for in-house accounting equipment and staff, in-house IT and AV equipment and staff.
What is AV?
Audiovisual.
The computer?
Sorry.
We have a lot of slides.
If decisions were made in the future to do such things as in-house accounting staff or information technology and audio-video equipment and staff, which have already been suggested by a variety of OVA committees, this type of integrated facility could have its storage and meeting rooms economically converted for administrative use.
Next, we wanted to describe the research on sites OVA might buy for a 3,000 square foot building. This drawing is the overall meadow property. In the lower left, outlined in green, is a parcel zoned for up to 5,000 square foot of commercial development. It is totally undeveloped. In its totally undeveloped condition shown here, and this is the picture of that bare lot at the corner of Oakmont Drive and the planned extension of Stonebridge Road. When we looked at this possible site in late 2012, we learned that the tax assessor valued it at $130,000. The owners, Redwood Equities Investments, will not price it for sale until they know all the costs for completing the infrastructure improvements required by their city permit for the overall meadow property. Because of our possible interests, one of their draftsmen prepared a potential site outline of a 3,000 square foot building with 28 parking spaces on this 3/4 acre property. This is his drawing. From what we know today, here is a picture of what it might cost to put OVA offices in this commercial location. Here are the estimated costs to finish site development and build offices and parking on the small meadow commercial parcel. As mentioned before, the purchase price we don't know because the developer doesn't know what all their costs are to develop the site and the infrastructure and the site development. We can, using $250 per square foot for 3,000 sized office, project $750,000. The parking construction with 28 spaces, almost $59,000. Parking lot lighting, 15. Landscape and irrigation, around 10. And soft costs of permits, fees, professional services, about $125,000.
Now let's turn to the 6594 Stonebridge Road, AKA the former beauty parlor. Slide 19 is a picture of the former beauty shop building. Slide 20 is an aerial view with two possible lot split lines drawn in green and pink. The green line is inside the pink line, if you can see there. The former beauty shop site and building are part of the larger Berger Foundation property that includes the Oakmont Market and the McBride Realty offices. So there is no tax assessor information to guide our understanding of the property value. Its long empty status and possible availability led to an extensive long-range planning committee investigation. OVA paid for a title report, building inspection, HVAC report, pest report, and appraisal. The appraised value of $467,250 in August of 2012 was based on the appraiser's finding that the building is only 2,100 square feet and sitting on just 0.45 in an acre lot split. That parcel is shown on the green line in the slide. The appraiser recommends that any offer should be conditional, addressing roof leaks, core mold issues, subdivision approval, appropriate access and egress easements, and of course, city permit approvals. To meet OVA needs, a larger lot split, shown by the pink line, would have to be negotiated. Also, to serve OVA as a long-term property investment, the building would have to be either fully reconstructed or extensively remodeled, and a 900 square foot building addition constructed. Finally, the parking lot would need to be reconfigured, landscaped, and lighting added. Each of these factors lead to a potential city permits complications. Based on the professional input we've received, here is what the estimated alternative costs might look like. Estimated cost to purchase and redevelop the beauty parlor property. Appraisal for the 0.46 acre plus purchase of a 0.23 acre addition to replace the parking lot lost by construction addition, $550,000. Construct 900 square feet addition at $250 a square foot, $225,000. Possible alternatives: reconstruct building and support systems at $150 a square foot would cost $315,000. Substantial remodel at $70 a square foot would cost $147,000. Parking lot reconfiguration and lighting, $15,000. Landscaping and irrigation, $5,000. Permits, fees, and professional services, anywhere from $59,000 to $84,000. The total range of estimates for this project would be $942,000 to $1,194,000.
Why on another flat?
Excuse me. To fully reconstruct or extensively remodel a 900 square foot building addition constructed. Finally, the parking lot would need to be reconfigured and landscaped and lighting added. Each of these factors lead to potential city permits complications. Based on the professional input we've received, here's what the estimated alternative costs might look like. I'm sorry. More significant has been the question of whether or not the property might become for sale on terms and for property lines that meet OVA's long-term needs. When OVA President Jim Kaiser wrote to the Berger Foundation Real Estate Vice President, Mr. Douglas Vance, on January 8, 2013, making an offer and stating OVA's desire to open negotiations, we were ignored. Later in February, our offer was rejected as very inadequate, along with a statement that the property was not on the market, as the foundation still wished to hold and lease the property. Since a year has passed since those contacts were made, and to give us more current input for tonight's meeting, follow-up calls this week were made to Mr. Vance. This time he indicated that the foundation has decided it might be beneficial for both the foundation and Oakmont to negotiate regarding the potential sale of a part of their larger parcel.
This slide shows the medical building we now rent space in addition to the Meadow and the beauty shop locations. Some resident comments have suggested we should buy the medical building where we presently have offices. Because of its size, inconvenient access, very poor maintenance history, parking limitations if fully occupied, inefficient design, and long-term high vacancy record, no serious consideration was given to buying it. For information purposes, the following slide shows some background, including questions regarding the association's fiduciary responsibility. You can see the building was built in '92. It's almost 9,200 square feet. The vacancy percentage now currently is 70%, but before we were in it, it was 90%. 48 parking spots, and it was purchased in 2009 out of bankruptcy for $1.6 million. The current tax assessment valuation, $1,530,000. Questions that the OVA should have and does have is, would a purchase and leasing program meet the association's fiduciary responsibility? What are the tax implications? Members' money in the form of dues should not be put at an unreasonable risk through an investment that is not a sure thing. In addition to property owned by others, 5 sites near Burger Center were investigated. Architects said that each of our central property locations, once the site infrastructure is provided, would have approximately the same cost for building construction. The same $250 per square foot for new construction we showed on earlier charts for property we would have to buy. Archeologic also advises us that any new central project at Burger Center may have to find a way to resolve city planning considerations regarding the way a new structure relates to surrounding open space and adjacent buildings. Other more obvious questions will be the overall number of required parking spaces, along with current city design requirements for parking lot landscaping, lighting, and safe foot travel. These are all elements that can only be clarified and resolved through the process of actually submitting an application of a design review permit. The differences between the 5 Burger Center locations we own are all related to the cost of developing site infrastructure, access, building construction, city setback regulations, and fire equipment access. To identify some of the specific differences, Carlisle Macy, civil engineers, was asked to review each site's characteristics and point out limitations and benefits. Here is what we learned. On the Oakmont and White Oak Drive site, right outside this building, it has difficult grading design due to sloping site. New drainage system required, building site narrowed by Oakmont Drive setbacks, costly access for water, sewer, electrical, and fire. Site 2, pictured on this slide, is the horseshoe pits and putting green area. And here are the engineer's comments. Level but history of weak soils and high groundwater would require significant soil export followed by import of non-expansive soils for building pad. Requires long drainage facilities toward Oakmont Drive. Requires new 8-inch by 250 linear foot fire main, above ground backflow, fire hydrant, and fire truck access. Problematic access for construction equipment and materials. Site 3, pictured here, is the lawn at the east end of this parking lot right out here, down that way. And here is the brief comment from the engineers. Too small for a 3,000 square foot building due to setback requirements from Valley Green Homeowners Association and White Oak Drive. but the parcel does have potential for parking lot expansion. Site 4, pictured in this slide, are the spaces in front of the two wings of our new CAC building. And here are the engineer's remarks. Relocate and replace significant drainage system. Remove existing irrigation, landscaping, and sidewalks. Import new construction pad soils for each side of the CAC entry. The final site, number 5, is pictured on this slide, part of the lawn area in front of the central pool. And the civil engineer's remarks are, level site but need to import building pad soils, ready access to electrical, water, and fire protection, moderate drainage design and installation, moderate sewer installation. We have not gone to the expense of getting detailed engineering studies and cost estimates for development of each of the 5 sites because the area in front of the central pool was identified as the least complicated site action. Thank you very much for your considered attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Bob. I'll try to take the next part for a few minutes. Based on the accumulated research, both current and done by earlier committees focused on the board's goals, the joint team representing the Oakmont Community Development Committee and the Long Range Planning Committee recommended to the board last February that a programming and schematic design contract be approved with Archeologics with directions to develop preliminary plans and cost estimates following the guidelines shown here for a building that was plus or minus 3,000 square feet in the central grass area. The guidelines were administration offices that reflect detailed programming stakeholder meetings that would provide a lobby design with access independent of OBA office hours, as well as service during office hours. Integrate 2 activity rooms so they are available independent of the OBA office hours. And develop a design that permits retaining the maximum central park-like or open space environment. So based on those guidelines, this is the schematic design that was first presented to us and which we saw under their February 25th contract last July. In addition to their work on this preliminary schematic design, Archeologics had preliminary discussions with city staff about Oakmont's development interests. Staff made it clear that parking improvements would be necessary, so they developed a design to provide 22 new spaces. This involves restriping for standard 9-foot wide spaces, which are approached at a 60-degree angle rather than the present 45-degree, which is unique to the burger parking lot. Because the OBA parking lot design includes 90-degree straight-in parking at the East Recreation Center and 60-degree angled parking, as is recommended for the burger, at the West Recreation Center. Now, at the same time, we got a curve. The design work was started by Archeologics. At the same time, the board was on another path, addressing serious safety issues raised by the extensive forensic study prepared by the Axis Consulting and Construction Company. Their report here in this auditorium on January the 15th last year had a significant impact on the future central building plans because it directly involved the 50-year-old central transformer and electric switch equipment located in the Berkeley Burger parking lot and the central pool and spa equipment building. If you're not personally familiar with them, on the left is what a 1960s era PG&E transformer looks like with the exposed cable and connection and conduits. And on the right, the doors are open to the electric switching equipment that controls the central distribution for all of this central property. And this, if you're not familiar with the central pool, shows the pool and spa equipment building, as well as to the left of that picture, the cabana area. The transformer safety concerns that were outlined by Archeologics in their report here last January are outlined on this chart. You can see that there is extensive corrosion and rust. There are exposed primary conductors and open sealed conduits, and their primary and secondary connections are weathering and flaking. They then went on to talk about their concerns for our electric switchgear and recommend that it needs to be in an enclosure, not out there in the cage in the parking lot. The present equipment's old design is extremely poor condition with parts not available or very difficult to source. The cabinet is unsafe and no longer secure. The extensive exterior and interior parts show corrosion, and the rust on the meters and circuit breakers and main switch are serious. They then commented on the central pool equipment and cabana concerns, and you can read them there as well as I can. But it was one of those buildings that Mr. Berger took the liberty of constructing without a building permit. But the tie downs in the foundation system and the roof system are all elements of concern. Axis strongly recommended eliminating the parking lot cage that you see on the left and installing an enclosed transformer adjacent to our present fire and sprinkler system hydrants. And so we have put in an application to PG&E for one of these new transformers to be located adjacent to those fire hydrant locations. And it would look like the picture on the right. PG&E has an 18-month time frame in order to complete this kind of process. I hate to think if they all burned out and exploded that it would take 18 months. I can't believe it, but that's the time frame we're working with, and that's where we paid a $2,000 deposit to get the process for replacement started. They also recommended a new pool and spa equipment building be built not only to take care of our present equipment properly, but also to house the new central electric switchgear. And so Archeologics was asked to come up with a design that integrated both these safety concerns as well as the initial outline for an office and meeting room building. So now we come to what I hope you'll enjoy most, because I'm looking forward to it. And that's the report on the current creative part of what the association has been trying to do. At the board meeting last month, Bob Giddings reported on behalf of the Central Project Detail Design Team, and he described a long list of improvements that the team felt were needed in Archeologics' original schematic proposal. And those recommendations reflect significant resident activity group input. And since that group has done their work, and it's now up to the board to decide where we go next, I want to really thank the 4 people that served so effectively on that team. You've heard from Pat Amadeo already tonight. You've heard from Bob Giddings tonight. But Stan Hendrickson was a key part of that, as he had been for our Central Activity Center development. And Don Green was also a key member of that 4-member team. So thank you all very much. Your work has helped us move ahead. But now I'd like to turn it over to Mitch Connor. He's the Archeologics principal architect, and he'll show and describe for us their revised central project plan. I should have given you this chart so that you can see what he's about to tell us. Mitch?
Well, good evening. Yes, I'm Mitch Connor. I'm a principal with Archeologics, the architect of the firm. And what I thought I would do tonight, and I'll try and keep it moving along here, is to highlight some of the design ideas that have evolved from the presentation last June. As you can see from the previous presentations from just about everybody, that getting one of these projects to move to the next step, can be a a very long and intense process, but the one thing that I've learned now working almost 10 years out here, originally on the Central Activity Building, is that, I think the community is very consistent in the way that they peel open these projects and begin to look at them, and to begin to not only look at the opportunities, but to realistically try and understand constraints, not because they're trying to stop the project, but they're trying to make it better. And I think that's been the spirit of this team, the Archeologics team. I think it's been the spirit of Pat and Bob and Stan and Don, and of course, John. So with that idea, what I thought I would do is to take you kind of from a macro level, Bob, and talk about the site possibilities around the central campus is what we refer to it as, and how the site that is right adjacent to the existing cabana, that would obviously replace it, is really, I think, the greatest opportunity to do a number of things. One, it solves the program requirements that Bob laid out for the administrative and meeting room space. But it also does other things that we think are of equal importance, and something that we began to investigate many years ago when we worked on the activity building, is that it starts to create sort of a town center kind of idea, sort of a there for Oakmont, which we honestly think is very important for the long-term health of the community, especially as it becomes maybe more walkable, as you get a different profile of residents in the community, that these are things that they will be looking for. And this is being well documented in the design of senior communities throughout the country, that the walkability aspect and the idea of having a centralized kind of development idea is really important. And I think it'll help not only accomplish some pretty interesting things here, and we'll go into that in a few minutes, but also I think as you reach out and try and market Oakmont as a place for people to come and live, it'll be a very interesting story to tell how you tackle that here. So what we have in the simplest sense is a collection of buildings. We have the activity building, burger, maintenance building, pool, lawn bowling, a large parking lot. And while, like I said, as we looked at the program issues related to the building footprint and making sure that that worked in an efficient way, we also cracked open the conversations of, well, can this building make the burger a better building? Can it make the central activity building different and actually enhance what's going on there? And the same thing for the pool, the lawn area, and then just the whole sequence of how people move through this collection of buildings. So one thing we learned from the presentation in June is that we needed to present this in a more holistic, comprehensive fashion. And this illustrative drawing that came from our landscape architect shows you that building and buildings, have sort of a common theme in the way that we landscape them, the way the sidewalks work, the way the lawn's going to work, the way we complement the burger improvements, and the way that we've enhanced the pool. And you'll see some sketches of that in a bit. But this was an important drawing for us, I think, and for everybody on the team, because it got us to sort of, planning is about macro and micro conversations. And so, we can kind of get lost in the weeds a lot of times, but it's important, and it's really our job as your consultants to kind of collectively pull everybody, not just the design team, but the board and people who volunteer for these committees, as well as folks like yourself, to kind of get up at that higher level and to be able to look at these things, because oftentimes we'll be thinking that we're solving a small little problem, and actually maybe we're creating a difficult situation somewhere else. So now as we start to drop in a little bit tighter, a couple things did happen that we think are real positive, and this came from input from all of you. So it's just want you to know that what happened last June and the input that we kept hearing about, and as it made its way to our office, is something that we pay a lot of attention to. We try and understand it, and we try and integrate it where we can with the overall project. So let me just give you a few examples. One of the things, and this came from the people who use the pool, is that as this is really the main entrance to the administrative area. It comes off the Burger Plaza, and right now you have a gate that goes in here to the pool. And what we felt was that there was sort of a conflict in the way that those uses work, because that's a high activity area, it can be very noisy. It seemed to be sort of working against the idea of a quieter office kind of situation where people are talking to people at the counter. I'll show you a bigger floor plan in a second. So we moved the gate and created a primary pool entrance over here. So when people come in, they can come in, they have access to showers and lockers, and they can get to the pool and they can leave. And so we've created a much wider sidewalk here and felt that this recreational use was more compatible with the central activity building, as well as some of these meeting rooms over here. And when I get into a little more detail with the bigger floor plan, you'll see what I'm talking about. And then the other thing is just, looking at, there was a concern that with Cabana going away, that we weren't addressing issues of shade and sun protection for people who use the pool, whether you're sitting in a lounge chair or at a table or playing ping pong. So the difference between what we were proposing last June to where we are today is that I think we've really enhanced that idea. And I'll show you a couple of sections through here. We have a really nice simulation sketch basically under these shade structures here, which is another recommendation that we're making. Some way of animating what's going on with different kinds of site and shade structures to make the pool environment a lot more interesting maybe than what's there right now. Let's talk about the floor plan and get maybe into this more micro conversation. So like John pointed out, it meets the program requirements for administrative space, meeting space, up here for the sort of utilitarian part of the project, switchgear, pool equipment, things like that. And then also how it has a relationship to the pool. So I'm going to walk you through the phases of the floor plan and how they work. One of the criteria that you saw a second ago in one of the slides is that the public lobby, the lobby that you would go to do your business with the staff and so forth, would be a space that, again, is accessed off of the burger area, the burger plaza, we call it. I think that's what it's called. And this area in yellow, off hours can be accessed through a key card or some kind of access device that would allow the public to come in here, get pamphlets, get information, even though the administrative part of the building is closed down. This represents pretty much the entire administrative space, open office, copy workroom, private offices for the OVA manager and the executive assistant, supplies, janitor, long-range storage, things like that. One of the things that came out of the work with the committee that Bob and Pat and Stan and Don were running is that we wanted to take sections of this open office area and make it flexible. So right now, this little island area that's out in the middle serves a filing and storage need, but you saw in one of the previous slides about maybe there might be an expansion of an accounting staff, maybe even on a temporary basis. So there's a lot of flexibility in reconfiguring this open office area to include other workstations. And then we made a recommendation. We felt that what we saw in the program that came from the meetings that we had with the users, and this is not uncommon, that the filing square footage or linear, the amount of filing and storage for just archival things seemed a little bit on the light side. So one of our recommendations was to expand that part of the footprint and then also provide some outdoor storage for the pool. The thing about this space, like I said, it does get closed down here, but it also gets closed down here. And I'll show you how that works as far as the meeting rooms, even though a conference room would be used by the staff as well as maybe the bigger meeting room. There's the break room here that's obviously set up for staff and the restrooms. But the building does have the ability, if the rest of it is all closed down, to be accessible by the community to use the conference room, meeting room, break room, and the restrooms without any kind of security breach for this area here. This entrance right here, and you'll see a simulation view looking down here in a few seconds, or a minute or two, shows you that this entrance, while it's not of a grand nature like what you see over here, sort of mimics some of the architectural character that you see at these end conditions, whether it's down here in the window wall system for the meeting room, or what you'll see here at the entry into the main lobby. As far as basically, this is reconstructing the cabana, and the main thing that got added to this was the whole switchgear topic as it relates to the transformer. This is also the electrical room for this building, and this switchgear, satisfies power needs for this building, the central activity building, maintenance building, and of course this building. We had to reconfigure the spa equipment because this is a really strict PG&E requirement about how they access this room, so that's why it's on this end of the building. And then, of course, you have your emergency storage here for, you know, in case there's something that happens out here where you need to shut down things and have access to emergency equipment. And then again, this is the, well, it's part of the roof structure, and you'll see a section through here that'll explain this a little better. But this is basically outdoor space. Part of it's under the eave of the roof, and part of it's under some canopies that we're going to propose, some shade canopies made out of fabric. So this makes up the floor plan, and these are some massing studies, some simple elevations that we worked on. We presented some of these in June. You know, the building materials are really the big change. Was the roof, when it was a standing seam metal roof, and that, you know, the more everybody thought about it and feedback that we got from the community, didn't really seem like a compatible material compared to what's on this building and what's on the central activity building, which is an asphalt shingle. So that's what we have here now. But pretty much everything else has stayed the same. It's a combination of wood siding, window wall systems, and you'll see a more detailed look at all this in a second. And you know, wood paneling. We have these sort of screens, sun screens that kind of come down, are attached within the planters, and you'll see some more details of that in a second. But one thing you can see here that we did, and this again came from the fitness folks, is to make sure that, you know, we don't get a bottleneck kind of condition happening here where this building would get too close and start to infringe on just the way people move through here. And I think by moving the pool entry here, it gave us even more motivation to get this right. And so now the way it works is from the face of this building, basically to the face of our building around the backside of this little thin element. And again, you'll see a nice simulation image of this. It's about 33 feet. So we've got a nice wide sidewalk, really deep planters, and I think it really opens up this area in a real positive way. This view down here is what you see if you were standing outside here and looking at the end of the building. This would be the entrance into the admin public lobby. You can see the pool, where people, there's a fence here, of course, but there's where the pool goes, and then the grass area up here. This section is through the administrative space. It's through the open office area. So again, just to illustrate that, you know, it's a big spacious space, very high, skylights up at the ridge line. There's those, we have windows that have, you know, window coverings. We have these sun screens that are also out in the planters. Here's the island that I was talking about earlier that could be reconfigured for an open office. And then these little alcoves for storage. So I think the storage needs, you know, it's not something you need to build out right away, but if you have the basic structure there, it gives you a lot of flexibility of how you want to use that, including some high windows that bring light in. These skylights will not only bounce light down into here where people are, you know, sitting, but it also bounces light into the interior of the building. And then this structure here, which came from the pool people, the pool folks, or whatever, pool committee, excuse me, because we're all pool people, is a fabric, kind of a Roman shade, horizontal Roman shade. I'll show it to you. It's the next slide of what we have in mind. So there's a structure that comes from the eave, and you can pull these back. You can do it, you know, some people might want it closed, some people might want it open. But the one thing is that there's some height here, so you can play games here, table games and things like that, sit on a lounge chair or whatever. So I think what's interesting about this building is that it has all these different personalities. You know, it has a relationship to all these different uses. And, you know, in some respects it does a lot of heavy lifting in that regard, but from a kind of return on investment, I think it's really doing a good job. So here's what we have in mind for the fabric stretcher, fabric shade devices. This is the Roman shades I was talking about. So if you can imagine, this would be over on the side where the building is. You can pull these open, pull them closed. And then over in that corner of the pool area, we're proposing that you use shade devices like this. Basically, it's a form of an umbrella, but they're fairly large scale. This is Kaiser Park in Windsor. And what's really fun about them, I think it animates the space, and when you get underneath it, and there are all these different layers, you get light kind of filtering through it. And they're great shade devices, and they're really a lot of fun. And I think it'll just add more interest to the pool area. And so we kind of took this shade idea, you know, a little bit further, not just what's along the building like you currently have, but the cabana, and then what we're proposing for our building, but also you know, having these sprinkled around in that one corner. So here's what we have. This is, we did a series of these simulation images. And this is the view. Well, I will say this too, because one of the comments that came from the June presentation had to do with the fact that not enough of the lawn was being preserved. So we are preserving about 60% of the existing lawn that's out there. So the sidewalk that goes along the, you know, the cabana is gone, obviously, and the planter, but 60% of this lawn area is preserved with foundation planting along the edges of the building. So what you're looking at here is basically across, I mean, this is the burger improvements. We use those drawings, you know, to inform this drawing here. Here's the entrance into the public lobby for admin. Here's the sunscreens that protect, you know, the work areas, private offices, the corridor that leads into, and this is the multi-purpose or the bigger meeting room that's on the end. Very transparent. You can see through, you know, and see the landscaping that's happening. This building back here is the central activity building. Again, we really took to heart this comment that, you know, we didn't want this to feel crowded. It would be a shame to have all this space and then start jamming things and bumping things into one another. So as I said earlier, moving the pool, here's the new pool entry. I think it'll basically be using a similar kind of fence that we have over there right now, with some kind of graphic, but something that really pulls you in. You know, it's kind of a wayfinding idea with using, you know, signage and so forth. This is a much wider sidewalk, benches. There's another bench tucked around the corner here. This is that stretching, you know, room in the fitness facility. Here's the entrance, the second entrance I was talking about. So when the other parts of the building is shut down, this is where people would come. This is, again, the main meeting room. Behind this tree, you can't really see it here, is the break room. And then these windows back in here are the conference room. One of the things we tried to do, while we wanted to have the height, the ceiling height, and in the case of the big room is similar to the workstation area in admin, but where we didn't need that height, we layered the building down, so when you look out from this fitness building, you're not looking at the tallest portion of the building, you're actually seeing a building that sort of layers itself. This is the pool equipment. This door is that PG&E door that they wouldn't back down on. It's not really where we want a door, but it's not a fight. I keep fighting. And this is the pool area. You're standing underneath the shade structure in that corner that I showed you on that really first site plan. Here's the Roman shades. This is kind of a wood siding material that's made, it's called Trex, and it's actually it's not an actual wood product, but it's like a synthetic wood that's really good for wet environments. And then you see the skylights that I was talking about. You really don't see the windows with this drawing, but it does bounce light into the into the work area, because right on the other side of this wall is the workstation and the files. This accent wall that you'll get a better view of here in a second is a wall that is the graphics for people coming from the parking lot through the Burger Plaza. This actually is the canopy for the entrance into the public lobby. So I think this wall, I mean, there was some debate about it being kind of an open type fence, but we felt for acoustic reasons that it needed to be solid, something substantial, so that there was some noise, mitigation here. But you can see it's a tall area, so it'll block the sun, but it'll also give you a chance to do something in here. And then these down here, this is the pool equipment, spa, emergency equipment area. And as you're walking through the Burger Plaza, and now you turn and you go into, this is the public lobby for the admin area. Here's the canopy, here's the wall I was just talking about. Pool's on the other side. You see the sun, this is like a woven wire mesh, and you'll see it again in an evening shot, which will be the next photo. But this is the room that you can access in off hours. The counter has the ability to close itself down. There's a door around the corner here. You can see pamphlets, and there's some sitting areas and so forth. So the public can get in here, both during business hours, but also, they have access with card security and so forth to use this. What we felt was important, and we said this in June, and we still feel this way, is that, let the building have a nighttime personality. We really believe in transparency in buildings, and especially this building, which if you've seen the city hall that we did up in Healdsburg, we did that several years ago. And one of the things about that, because we make a similar sort of comparison, I mean, this building in our mind is sort of like a civic building. I mean, it represents how you govern yourself. It should be transparent, you know, there's nothing happening behind the scenes kind of thing. And we feel it's important, at least in the work that we do in the public sector, that be sort of an overriding idea. So again, you know, this is the public areas for the admin and so forth. There's the meeting room, you see people in there. Again, the grass area can be used. I mean, this is an outdoor room, and you know, I hope that through the OBA, you know, since they're really good at putting, you know, really effective committee structures together, that you start programming this space. I mean, it could be, you know, incredibly successful. One of the things that we added was we widened the sidewalk along the parking. We felt it was way too inadequate right now, especially with cars bumping up right against it. It was about double the width that's there now. We just want to get some kind of sun shade through trees, you know, just some lighting up here to sort of, we're also big advocates of, you know, landscape lighting and so forth. One thing that can happen is you can take the lights down in the building. These metal screens that are out here have lights in the base of them. And the way this fabric works, I don't have a sample of it here tonight, but we've used it up in Cloverdale. We did a fire station up there. We used the same kind of product. And the light shines through this woven wire mesh, and it gives a really soft little shimmer to the outside of the building. And it'd be a really nice backdrop for different functions that go on here in the evening hours and so forth. So, a couple of comments about cost. You know, the number that we were working with in June would have the project pegged at about 1.1 million. You know, as we look back at that number, the things that were not included in that, because we simply didn't have enough information, had to do with a lot of these site amenities, landscaping, site lighting, site accessories, shade structures, and also what it didn't have, and this is a big question for this community, is when are you going to build this? I can tell you right now, you know, the bidding environment is definitely starting to heat up again. So we have an escalation clause with a midpoint of construction about a year from now. So that is factored into, and we haven't got the numbers all pulled together yet, but we'll be releasing that, you know, here shortly to the OBA board, and of course you guys will see it. But, you know, these are components that, like I said, we didn't have them before. Our numbers at the 1.1 really focused on the building itself. And now we have, you know, kind of another layer of information that will be included in that. And my final comment, and again, it goes back to what I opened with. I just think that it's important to create a context for buildings. And, you know, what really interested us when we interviewed for the Central Activity Center, besides the fact that we did a lot of work in senior communities and we did a lot of recreational type projects, was to be able to create a place. And we firmly believe that there should be no building in any community that doesn't break outside its property lines and understand that it has a responsibility to be a community building. And by that I mean it's about placemaking, it's about enriching what happens on the street, in the open areas, what happens between buildings, because that's where the interaction takes place most of the time, a lot of the time. And you can only make that happen when you have a building. You can only do it so much with landscaping and things like that and plazas, but at some point you need architecture to help bring that all together. We think this is an incredible opportunity for this community, and again, we look forward to the next round of comments and working with OBA. So I hope I've given you a good overview of how we approach this.
Thank you very much, Mitch. We're going to get to a question period soon, so please stand by. I'm sure there will be some for you. But the next PowerPoint image, since we have to pull away from this beautiful night shot, is to ask our treasurer, Chuck Chenault, to talk about what our financial reserve situation is. So I'll start you out with a November 30th picture, Chuck.
Hey, when John put this presentation together, we didn't have the December numbers ready yet, but now I do have the December numbers, so I'm going to confuse you totally and talk about entirely different numbers than what are up there. And I understand at the end of the presentation or the program tonight that there'll be handouts with these updated numbers that you can take with you if you want to. So the Capital Improvement Fund in December had a balance of $1,399,000. In the Orchard area, there's 9 additional homes left to sell, so that's an additional $132,000. And adding in the addition for the Meadows, $544,000, brings a total available for capital improvement of $2,075,000. The Asset Replacement Fund at the end of December has a balance of $1,258,000. The transfers from the operating fund, from the budget into this fund is $512,000 for the year, and the estimated surplus at the end of December is $149,000, leaving us a balance available in that fund of $1,919,000.
Thank you, Chuck. Just because of the process of putting together the PowerPoint, we had to close it down last night before CFM was able to give Chuck these numbers this morning that he talked from. And so over at the table, where next to where you came in, is a paper copy of the December 31st numbers. And please take one with you so that you'll know what kind of numbers the board is looking at in connection with possible capital improvement. The next thing that we want to do is talk about a legal analysis of what the board's responsibilities and opportunities are. So we asked Cassie Turner, our new manager, to get both a legal opinion from Malcolm Manuel and a second opinion from Stephen Weil. And so Cassie, if you'll take it from here, please. And I'll give you another chart.
What I want to address the public tonight is the use of the capital funds to construct the new administration building. But I want to break it down into 3 components so you understand it a little bit better. Because at one or two of the board meetings, people stood up and said that they felt that the board should be putting this out because of the expense of the building, the large expense, that the board should be putting this out to a vote of the membership. So I want to break 3 different issues down for you to better understand what the big picture is about this. Number 1, the first issue is, does the board have the authority to make capital improvements independent of the voting membership? And both Attorney Malcolm Manuel and Attorney Steve Weil said yes. And the reason why is OVA does not have modern association bylaws, therefore they contain few limitations on the board's authority. OVA bylaws, Article 5.1, powers and duties of the board, does not limit board power with respect to the capital improvement fund or the construction of capital improvements. It states all corporation powers of the association shall be exercised by a board of directors, which board shall conduct and manage its business and affairs. This allocation of authority with the right to make decisions vesting in a board unless the governing documents or the law provides otherwise, which your governing documents don't, mirrors the typical allocations of the Corporations Code 7210. Now let's talk about the Capital Improvement Fund. For common interest developments, a capital improvement fund is described as 1, any substantial discretionary addition to the common area, 2, voluntary significant upgrades to the common area materials, or 3, discretionary material alterations to the appearance of the development. The capital improvement fund that you have is not the traditional legally restricted reserve fund pot of money. In OVA's case, it is actually a separate fund from the reserve fund or the operating funds. So in this association, you have 3 funds. You have the day-to-day operating funds, you have the reserve funds. Those reserve funds are used to, let's say, replace this building's floor, the stage, the roof, all the components that make up the property and the facilities that are already here. Capital improvements are for things that are not already listed in the reserve funds. So that is a separate fund. It's been separate since the developer started putting in these, what do you call them? Impact fees. And so you have to keep the idea that those are separate funds. And 96% of those funds are from the developer. So then let's talk about membership voting. OVA does not have what is considered modern updated CCNRs, like I said before, and both of Steve Weil and Malcolm did comment on that. Therefore, OVA is not subject to the usual HOA requirement that, let's say, a homeowners association wants to expend 5% or more of its funds from the operating budget for capital improvements. It would have to get a vote of the membership. But the critical part of this is that capital improvements in normal homeowners associations are usually taken out of the operating funds. That's the distinction here. You have a separate capital improvement fund. And besides that, your board has total authority to figure out what they want to do with the money. So the building expenditure is not coming out of the operating budget. It is coming from a separate capital improvement fund. There is no OVA requirement that a membership vote be obtained for capital improvements or use by the board of the capital improvement fund. Plus, only 4% of that fund came from member assessments. Again, 96% of the fund came from developer impact fees.
What Cassie talked about is the legal point of view. What she didn't talk about is the fact that the board is also a political organization and has the ability to make political decisions outside its legal authority. And that means that if the board were to decide in the case of this project that they wanted an opinion from the public, they could. She just said we're not required to do so. So in conclusion, and I think we hope you'll agree that we've had a productive hour and 25 minutes. The conclusion is just what this slide says. And we're asking what's next. I think you're probably asking what's next. In the December 15th report of the board executive session, we committed to try and extend deadlines so that we have more room to solve difficult problems. That effort was successful. We don't know exactly how much time, but we feel comfortable with working with this developer with some extended time. We also said we'll further investigate and analyze options for renting, buying, building at various locations, or remaining where we are. And we'll do that in this extended time that we've negotiated. We ask you to please assist us with your thoughtful input in the days ahead. After carefully reflecting on all that you've learned tonight, after picking up the financial document that you can pick up on your way out as to what our reserve and capital account situation is, after reading for First Things First handout that they gave you when you came in. But most of all, have careful reflection on what we've tried to share. It'll help us immensely. Now I think if we can bring up the lights, John, we want to go to questions. And we've got this microphone here. I don't know that we'll have answers to the questions, but if you'll wait for the microphones, we'll at least have the opportunity to hear your question, and we can get back to you with answers. So if you want to stand up, raise your hand. John will come running in your direction to ask a question. We've got a second microphone if that doesn't move quickly enough.
Alan Scott, Woodley Way. My question goes to the presentation on the exorbitant cost of the beauty salon and the investigation of it and the rendition of the facts regarding the OVA negotiations. Do you realize that most of that was incorrect? And let me go through it specifically. That when the OVA made a negotiation input or negotiation offer to the Berger Foundation, they offered $100,000 to purchase it, which was an insult. Do you realize that the property was appraised at $467,000, and that I had talked to the Berger Foundation in April and was able to talk around the figures of $300,000, $350,000 as a sale price. Secondly, the property has a building of 2,200 square feet. Third, the OVA paid for an expensive appraisal which said the building was sound. It did not need reconstruction. The building was sound and needed remodeling, and that would be somewhere under $200,000. Thank you.
I think the only answer I can provide, if you want to comment, is we indicated what the professionals had advised us were the estimates. I think there is certainly room for disagreement when it comes to estimates. And when it comes to negotiations, there's certainly room for maneuvering as far as negotiations concerned. And so the question of negotiating for the beauty parlor property is certainly one of the factors that's in front of the board now. And thank you for your help, Alan.
Hi, my name is Lisa Berman, and I'm at Oak Trail Place. I'm relatively new to Oakmont, but I will say that I've been paying very, very close attention to this issue from the day I arrived here. And I've actually been opposed or skeptical about this whole project, but I really appreciate this meeting because it outlined to me very explicitly a symbiotic relationship between the need for updated electrical, help around the pool, the upgrade of some facilities for the offices. I mean, I say as a new person, if you want to consider moving here, going to the offices that exist is not very impressive and not very helpful because they're not efficiently organized. So I have actually had my mind turned around because of this meeting, and I really appreciate the fact that it took place. Thank you.
We appreciate the comments, but I want to be sure that we get to all the people that have questions. So I've got another microphone here if we need somebody over on this side.
Thank you. Can you tell me if, Rich Randolph from Ribbon Rock, if these impact fees can be applied towards enhancements or improvements in our existing facilities? We've seen in the news about improvements needed here at Berger Center, the East Rec Center. Can those be scheduled, and are these funds available for those purposes?
Yes, the funds are available for improving or repairing any of our facilities. So it applies to the West Recreation Center that the committee is working on, it applies to the East Recreation Center.
Thank you. What is the extension we're
Can't hear you.
Let me get one.
What's important, it's an important distinction that any of those repairs for the West Rec Center, the East Rec Center, the Berger Center, buildings that are already here have an asset replacement fund, not a capital improvement fund. The developers, the fees that the developers are paid are in that separate capital improvement fund. So the asset replacement fund has plenty of money to fix all of those repairs in the existing building. Does that make sense?
okay? And the impact fees are restricted or could be used if they were needed for those?
If the buildings fell down and maybe, you know, we had to start from scratch or something, you could use them, but you shouldn't use them for that.
Shouldn't? Okay.
No, because that's what the asset replacement fund money is
I
for.
was asking if they're restricted to new construction.
Yes, for the most part they are.
And what is the extension period? Can that be disclosed?
The developer did not want to agree to a specific 2-month period of time or 3-month period of time. We were faced with what we thought was a deadline to present them with a construction alternative in time for them to build a building at the time of our lease expiring in the medical building. And therefore we were being pressed to provide something that we weren't ready to ask them if they wanted to build for us.
We have an extension, how long now?
They didn't agree to a specific length of time. They agreed to work with it. And so our attorney is drawing up what he calls a memorialization of this discussion to let them know that we do want to work with them for an extended period of time. We have a lady here that I gave a microphone to, and then we'll get to the back.
Peggy Bounbeck, you want my address? What do you need? My address or just my name?
Just your name.
Okay, Peggy
But
Bounbeck.
hold that right up and speak loud.
Okay. I have a question and a comment. The question is then, can the capital improvement money be used to buy and or renovate the beauty parlor building?
We understand it can.
It can.
It's a new building to us.
Okay, so that's one possibility. And then a couple of comments, actually. There was also a suggestion made that we just add on to one piece of the existing CAC just for administration, which would not then require as much room because there already are bathrooms and a lobby and that sort of thing there. I just want everyone to be aware of that. And the other comment is the man from Archaeologics was talking about this new building being a community building, and I don't see it at all as a community building. We don't go to the administration offices as a community building. We just go there for business. And again, this would be a building built just to house 6 employees.
Ridge Drive. I think this was a very thorough presentation, but what was missing was any comment that we don't need this building right this minute. We have so many other issues. Someone mentioned it isn't very attractive to go to the current administrative office building. It's less attractive to go to the locker rooms in the West Rec, to see the rotted out balcony on the East Rec, to see all the duct tape holding down the floor in this building, to know that there is asbestos here that needs to be removed in the foreseeable future. And these things have been hanging fire for a long, long time. We don't have the manpower, we don't have the staff to handle all of these issues, let alone, at this point in time, take on the construction of a major building. All we're asking for, pause, let's fix what we've got, then let's look at a building.
My name is Herb Pisa. I moved here 4 years ago. When I moved to Oakmont, which I had decided about 25 years ago that I'll move here, when I visited all these wineries, I said, when I retire, I move to Oakmont. I moved to Oakmont and immediately saw that there was an awful lot of infrastructure which was kind of decrepit and bad. In 4 years, I haven't seen any change there. I haven't seen that bathrooms, showers, golf paths. I used to be working on the golf course, and you ride the golf cart all day. You get a bad back because the paths are so bad. But in any ways, it looks like you have plenty of money to fix it. I wish you would do something. Fixing it. Now let's come to the new project. I think we were quite impressed about a very thoughtful plan the architect has put together. But this hinges upon the size, the requirement. And that's the key question. What is the requirement? How big of an administration volume building is required? I noted just a few items which came out in whatever you said, or anybody said. I'm not convinced. Nobody said how much personnel needs to be accommodated in administration. I surely would like to know that.
Six.
How many parking spaces are needed when people come to administration? I'm not so sure. You have explained that. Space open when the office is closed. I fully agree. Why would we want a space, a lobby? I notice most Oakmont people stay in the evening at home. They don't go into the office space to pick up a piece of paper or something. I think that's a pretty wild idea.
If you really have a question, we'd like to get to people's
I'm
questions.
I make my point, Mr. Taylor, okay? You have planned in new meeting rooms. What are those for?
Not new. They exist already.
Okay.
We're just moving them to a different location.
Files. You talked a lot about files. Today, most information is stored on computers, not on files. So the key question is, what size volume do you need? And that determines the cost, and that determines the location, and many other important things, and I think that's what you need to convince us about.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Senator Goff at Oak Leaf Drive. Question regarding the capital account. What other plans does Oakmont or the OVA have in place for that capital account going forward, let's say 5, 10, 15 years? Does anyone know, or is there anything on the tables going out 10 years or something of that nature, or is it just this building that's on the...
The only thing I'm aware of that is being planned is, or looked into, are pickleball courts.
That's important. Thank you. That's what I'd like.
Okay, Mac McHenry, 238 Mockingbird Circle. I have a comment and a broad question, John, if I may. My comment would be... my comment would be that it was a very professional, put-together presentation. I remain, though, opposed to either a new back office central administrative building or a used one on the basis, in my mission-oriented experience, the office building, as has been said, doesn't rise to the essential priority of maintaining and improving a quality of life for all of the community. We don't go to the office building for improving our life. It would be nice, and I say it's a nice to have priority, but don't put it at the top of the heap. Thank you for your time.
We've got another one down here first, and then...
I'm Bob Chapman on Pythian Road. One of the concerns that I had, and it's a concern that Harriet Polk raised, seemed to be answered by what Cassie said, is that capital improvement funds must be used for new buildings. If so, then the other buildings that need support, the East Rec, the West Rec, whatever, couldn't be financed by these funds in any case. If that's true, then that takes that argument out of the question. So that's a comment. Here's my question. If we go ahead with the plan that Mitch described, and I think it's a gorgeous plan, what would be the net increase in our monthly dues?
There's no proposed dues impact at all.
I would like to rebut. I did not mention the money. I said we don't have the staff, we don't have the time. West locker rooms, it's been 4 years. No one has been able to attend to that. Where is the time and effort going to come from to build a new building when we can't handle what we already have? Nothing to do with the money.
Arthur Booth, I have a comment here to the board. During the past 18 months, a proposal was put forward by a board member which included obtaining a minimum of 3 bids for any architectural service, construction, remodeling, etc. to take place within Oakmont's facilities. This proposal was passed unanimously. Is this procedure still in place? If not, what are the new procedures and when did this change take place? Thank you.
The procedures are in place, Art, as you characterized them. The difference being that in the negotiation of this contract, a construction alternative was put in there, and that took the place of the bidding process. Nothing prevents us, if we decide not to pursue the construction alternative and to change the impact fee payment process, of going to a full bidding process on anything that we choose. This is simply an alternative to the bidding process that has advantages, because under the construction alternative, the contractor does not get any profit or administrative overhead out of the process. And that adds to the value of the construction alternative over the amount of dollars. It's a board choice to make a trade-off between a construction alternative and competitive bidding. But nothing prevents us from going back to a competitive bidding if we decide not to follow the construction alternative. Pardon me.
James Allen, Oak Brook Lane. I have a lot of questions, but other people are waiting, and I will limit myself to 2. If I understood the explanation of the impact fees coming off the new houses as they were purchased, what I gathered was, as time has passed and the market has changed, the fee paid for each house has increased. If that's correct, then is it really benefiting the community to somehow accept a lump sum payment in advance for all the houses sold and unsold? And what kind of formula was used to determine what that impact fee would be for the overall number of houses involved? The other, very quickly, is, are Mr. Manuel's, Mr. Wiles' opinions available in writing, and if so, where could someone obtain a copy?
I'll ask the manager to touch on your second question, because I'm not an authority on what we do with lawyers' opinions. But the answer to your question about the impact fees is, the board found, in the case of negotiations with Mr. Carinali, that if we got $500,000 up front, and it was going to take him 2 years to build out and sell those houses, that we had the advantage of using that money, which at the time the board thought could go right into building an office building. They were coupled together in that environment. And so it was a decision as to, can we get the money and do what we want to do now versus waiting for the money and doing it later. But your observation about waiting later might have brought us in a little more money, that's a correct one, because even the agreement we have now, the value of that construction alternative will continue to go up if we choose to go down that road, because the CPI is still being recalculated every 2 months. But the construction costs go up as well. Cassie, can you comment about legal opinion?
Sure. I'm certainly happy to provide the legal opinions, but I have to get the release from the board, because all of the, any attorney that writes an opinion letter to the board always has these big capital letters on the top of their letter saying privileged and confidential for board use only. So that's an issue that I'll have to address with the board, but I don't see any reason why there's nothing to hide.
My name is Vern Levson. I think I understand the answer, but I'm not sure everybody in this room or that is not here and might be watching later on the video. If the decision was made to not use the $540,000 in the manner proposed by the Hutter Group, and instead we obtain $500,000, what would we use that money for if there is no other capital project on the horizon? That's my question.
The only thing that the community has proposed in that regard, to be considered, not even recommended yet, not located, not designed, is the possibility of some new recreational facilities. Whether it's limited to pickleball courts, or whether it becomes a multi-purpose facility that might serve badminton and volleyball and pickleball and things. But expanding the recreational facilities is certainly a legitimate use for those funds, and something like that can come up. But that's the only thing I'm aware of that is in any state of this plan.
Anita Eastland, Hood Mountain Circle. My question is to the architect. You described the building as being very tall, high inside, without specifying how high the ceilings would be. And I'm wondering how that adds to the cost of the building, the cost of the heating of the building, and the comfort of the people working in the building. My last home was a timber frame home, very dramatic, very beautiful, but very expensive to heat and not very comfortable to live in. So that's my question to the architect.
Pass the mic up here so I can get him that. We didn't have enough.
You know, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, obviously, if there was a flat roof in the meeting room and a flat roof, you know, flat ceiling, I mean.
How high is the ceiling?
It's about 23 feet. But, you know, today with the way mechanical systems, you know, are designed and the way that they can direct the air, I mean, the creature comfort aspect is a lot more efficient. That's driven by the state energy regulations. So we have to meet those. In fact, this building will have to go one step further and be about 15% over the Title 24, which is the state energy part of the project. And locally here, we call it Cal Green. So all that is taken into account. So we have to meet, you know, a fairly strict set of criteria.
How does it add to cost?
I couldn't tell you right now. And that would be part of this costing exercise, but you know, we can highlight that. And actually have it as an alternate. We did drop the ceiling.
Thank you. Over.
I'm Tony Lakowitz, Bellhaven Place. As I understand from the presentation, one of our options is to keep renting where we are. In fact, it says up there one of the options is to remain in place. I've been told that we currently spend about $40,000 a year on rent at the Blue Roof building right now. And if our lease is going to be expired next year, I believe it was stated, would that be at the same rental, or could it go up? Could it go up significantly? If we stay in that building, are we locked in at the $40,000 a year, or could it be $50,000 or more? Where can it go?
Well, I think, Tony, the practical aspect of that is you have to negotiate a rental rate for the second part of our lease. And without talking with the owner, you don't know. But on the other hand, there's a lot of empty space around that might be suitable for us to use. And so the elements of competition and things of that nature. I would guess it might go up. I guess he might, if we wanted the parking lot to look cleaner and the hallways and the bathrooms to be properly maintained, you know, he might say, you ought to pay me more for it rather than the...
But bottom line is, we don't really know.
We don't know.
Thank you.
Kathleen Conley. Mountain Vista.
Like a snow. straight in.
I have a more technical question. Historically speaking, have all of the impact fees, say from Quail Run and the Orchard and developments prior to that, have they always been designated for capital improvement?
Yes.
Really?
And,
What'd they
and
build?
could you tell us, other than the maintenance building, what capital improvements have been?
Central Activity Center.
Okay.
That was a remodel.
When you,
That's not a build out. That's a
you
remodel. That's a
build additional
remodel.
square footage there,
That's not a build out. That's not a new building. They kept walking.
Good evening. My name is Sue Carell. I'm on Oakleaf. I'm also a broker and a property manager, and I've done a lot of financial planning. Well, I appreciate your presentation. It was very informative. I learned quite a bit tonight. My concern is this. Number one, it's my understanding that the OBA's priority is to focus on good business practices in maintaining a first-class facility here with an emphasis on recreational facilities, not on office facilities. I think that's why they've made the decisions they have in the past about having the office space be secondary to recreational efforts and priorities. So I do not favor putting all this money into an office space. I'm not satisfied with the information we haven't gotten about the financial spreadsheet here. I mean, there are going to be increased operational expenses, it seems to me, if you're spending $2 million on a building and you have $676,000 to put towards that building. I suspect you're not going to be paying full cash for this building. You're probably going to be borrowing some money. Is that true or not?
I think what I heard you say was that we'd have to finance the building in some way, and that's not true. We would develop it for cash.
Okay.
We have the cash. The other point that I thought I heard you asking was about the cost of maintaining a new building. I think you have to look at the fact that the board considers saving the annual rent that we're paying for lease space as a funding source for paying those costs for maintaining a new building. So it's among the trade-offs that you as a property manager would understand.
Well, what I don't see really is the financial plan. I guess that's what I'm saying. And I would like to see, I'm in favor of the delay, and I would love to see more information about the long-range plan financially.
Thank you. I understand the question of wanting more
Not just
information.
the bricks and mortar, but the financial plan.
We have one over on this side.
Yes, actually, this lady's brought a question to my mind, and then I had some other questions before that. I'm Sue Baldwin from Oakleaf Drive.
Thank you.
So the $40,000 that we would be saving by dropping out of the lease where we are would be put into maintaining this new building. We wouldn't be saving $40,000 a year. Is that correct?
I think that's correct. There certainly is a cost to maintain a building, whether it's our central activity center or this building that we're in. I was just pointing out that although that would be an additional cost, there was a revenue source to do that. I wasn't indicating it would be a savings to build a new building.
Oh, I guess I misunderstood. My logic was that we would be saving some money because we wouldn't be paying for a lease. So my other question was, I'm not opposed to a new building. It seems to me, though, that the new design breaks up our open space. And if the wing were moved over to the burger side, we would have one common lobby to service both the break room and the meeting room and the offices. And we could utilize that second lobby entrance space within, whatever needs might come up. But, and I know we would have to have other entrances because of fire regulations and so on, but we wouldn't necessarily have to have two lobbies. That seems a little inefficient. I still see some inefficiencies in the design with the single-use corridor and the ceiling, like was mentioned, etc. But I really hate to see the open space broken up.
Thank you.
And even though it's decorative grass, not lawn. It's still open space, and I think it should be connected. Thank you.
Excuse me, we've got a lady over here.
I'm June Dever, and I just moved to Oakmont 6 months ago, and it is a lovely community. And I'd like to thank the board for serving as volunteers. It is a thankless job, and we do appreciate it. However, I would like to see the capital improvement money, which I understand that can only be used for new or purchase of a new building for our use. And that is $2 million, is that correct? We have $2 million in that account that has come from the sale of houses. Once that money is gone, there are no other houses, it will be gone, correct? So, if we could find that we could buy the beauty shop for $500,000, we would have $1.5 million left to add a meeting room at a future date, or another capital improvement that would be more fun. This seems to me as fun space. I hate to see this used as office and employee use because it's so beautiful here. And so thank you for your help, and I hope it turns out to be beautiful for all of us.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jimmy Subarao. Her question leads into my next question. If the capital improvement fund can be used, if I understand correctly, for new recreational facilities that can be introduced into the community, I think the residents ought to be given a choice of whether they want to spend an administrative building or new additional recreational facilities that enhance the quality of life.
Thank you.
I'm Jim Sanner, and I live on Fairfield Drive. I thought the presentation was very good. I would like to ask a question, however. Would this be made in hard copy so we could look at it at the OBA office? Because when you go through this many things so quickly, square footage, cost, recommendations, it's very hard just to get all this down pat with a slideshow. So I would ask, is that a possibility, even if it would be at cost to residents that would be interested? That's number one question.
The answer is we want to make it as available as possible. What we have arranged for is to have it published on the website so that you can look at it on your
every sheet and every drawing.
Every drawing. We have the recorded voice of those of us that made comments. We did try to script what the speakers said, and if you think it would be helpful to have someone type that up in a finished format and add that as a hard copy in the office, we'll certainly be glad to do so.
I think that's a great idea.
And if you would like to see paper copies of these slides in the office, we'd be glad to add that to the list.
I prefer paper because then I can go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Next question. I noticed Mr. Connor, is that his name, the architect? He said this building would be about 1.1, but then there would be additional cost. Just guessing, could that be as much as another $500,000? Okay, that's the first question. The second one, Wendy did her presentation on the beauty salon, and I thought her numbers were a little high, but she said $1.1 million to fix that building and add on to it. Is that correct? Did you hear that at the presentation?
142 to 1.8.
Well, wouldn't you rather have a building for 1.1 where you own the land rather than one for 1.6 where you're taking up land that could be used for something else at a later date? The court basically said, Cassie said it, they can do what they want because we have old bylaws. Maybe the bylaws need to be changed. It was a law. I say we're being denied the right here to voice our opinions, voting, the internet, all of this media that's here today. Times have changed. You've got to change your bylaws and give the people the right to express their opinion by voting. Thank you.
Back in the corner.
Hi, I'm Jane Georgie from Woodley Place. You mentioned that before the offices were taken over, there was a 90% vacancy factor. and it dropped to 70% after we took space in the medical office building, correct?
Yes.
And the lease is up in 2015. And we're considering several different avenues. It seems we have the lessors over a barrel to negotiate a much lower rate and get them to improve that facility to be what we need it to be. Has anybody considered approaching them this way?
We certainly have, and that's one of the things, if we decide to extend the lease, that we would do.
And are you really going to, I know you don't have to, but I'm asking you straight out, will you consider allowing the community to make a vote regardless of how the bylaws are written up? Are you willing to consider?
I'm only one person. There's 7 members on the board. The board would consider that, I'm sure.
Take it to the board.
All right, so should that be asked at the next board meeting? Would the board agree to allowing the community's vote to carry the decision?
I think the question that comes up at this point is to vote on what? The point being that I think if the board were to decide to put out a vote, they would want to be sure precisely what it was that needed to be voted on. And they would want to be sure that there was an appropriate communication opportunity so that people understood what was being voted on.
Yes.
And I think those are questions that the board would decide before they decided to approve an advisory vote of some sort.
Perhaps an ad hoc committee to decide on what we can vote on.
Bob Hartsock, Greenfield Circle.
Yes, Bob.
If you decide to go ahead with the project and with the Hunter Group, how are you going to be assured that you're getting a competitive price from the Hunter Group?
I'm sorry, say that again.
How are you going to be assured that you're going to get a competitive price for the project from the Hunter Group?
What we have is a provision in the contract with Archeologics to be the mediator to look at each of the bills and each of the expenses associated with the project.
And when he gives you the price?
Yes, oh, absolutely. So it needs to, all those bills need to add up to the amount of impact fee.
You're talking about bills or you're talking about proposals? You're saying bills.
I thought you were talking about the actual expenditures.
Well, you're not going to proceed unless you get a definite price from them, right?
My hearing aids must be failing.
You're not going to proceed with the project unless you get a firm price from Hunter Group, right?
No, we're not, the price will not come from the Hunter Group. The price will come from what the architects tell us is what the cost of that structure should be. And then they just simply get credit for $544,000 of that cost.
Okay, with all due respect to architects, I've had a lot of experience with this. It's not the same as getting competitive prices. Not at all. And I think if we want to be assured, if we go ahead with this, that we get competitive prices, and if Hunter comes in low, then okay, we know we're getting a good deal. To base it on one person's estimate that it's a competitive price is not reasonable. We did this recently with Oakmont Golf Club, and the engineer's, the architect's estimate was way low, to the extent we couldn't finish the project. So competitive prices, I think, are the only way to, bidding when it's competitive.
I think that's a helpful observation, Bob. The only thing that the association has, what the association thinks, not speaking for myself, what happened several years ago, was that it was a very beneficial process to have a construction alternative build our maintenance building. Because A, we got it at what we were told after it was completed was a time and materials bargain cost for that building. And we got it a year ahead of when we would have been able to put it out to bid and build it ourselves. So the association made a decision at that time that those things were worth whatever might be the advantage of a bid. I don't know whether that's right or wrong. I can just tell you what I read from the record.
I can tell you, doing work on T&M is a great way to go because you can't lose. going out for bid assures you're getting the best value for your dollars. And I think it'd be a huge mistake to not do that. And there's no reason not to do it.
I think that's completely dependent on the bid.
Can we get your mic back and let him offer?
You want to speak more?
I mean, that's completely dependent on the bid environment. I mean, when things were hot and heavy, and we couldn't even get coverage for a lot of the trades for people bidding, then, you know, we were sort of at the mercy of how these numbers were coming in. Things slow down, you know, the numbers change. What I will tell you right now, we just did that fire station up in Fountain Grove, is that people are not buying projects in. They cannot do that. They cannot, you know, bottom feed projects like, you know, people could, or used to do if they wanted. It's just that, you know, the risk and reward for the contractors is huge today. But to your point, and I agree with it, is that, first of all, we give you what we think is the probable cost based on our experience in a database and tracking project. You're absolutely right. The truth is when it hits the streets and you get, you know, what's really happening. But I would say if things, you know, things are sort of heating up in certain sectors and other sectors are so cold, and we just have to assess that. And what we did with the activity center is we shortlisted a number of qualified firms. We told them what our estimate was. We made sure that they had built similar facilities. We understood their management approach. We required for every trade that was in that scope of work, we get 3 estimates. So we locked in the management number. We got 3 competitive estimates on electrical, mechanical, sheetrock, whatever. So, and that, you know, came out pretty well. But if you build the budget right, put contingencies where you need them, you know, make sure that, you know, you cover the unknowns. But we're not a big fan necessarily of just, you know, throwing it open to anybody who's got a set of, who's got a carpenter's bag in his pickup truck. You know,
I'm not suggesting that.
and I know you won't, but I'm just saying that there's a number of ways to do it. And I certainly don't want to give anybody the wrong impression here that our number is I mean, we're telling you what we think it's going to cost. But the market will tell us what it's really worth.
But the guy that bids on it, he's staking his company or that project, his finance firm. You know, you're just giving an estimate. You know, if your estimate's wrong, no harm to you. Come on.
We understand the comment, and I think the whole series of comments that we're getting this evening, I hope illustrate to you the kind of complexities that we as volunteer members of the board are trying to deal with. And we'll approach them as effectively as we can.
One last thing, I think it's kind of naive to think that somebody's going to do a project with no admin and no profit. It's there somewhere.
2 more questions, because I can see people are starting to move, and we'll take one at the back and one down here in front.
Delphine Adams, Oak Trails Circle. I've heard a lot of things tonight. One of the first things I've heard is that the Capital Improvement Fund should be used for new construction, not that it must be used or shall be used. There's a big difference, and I'd like to know, must it be used for new construction? And if so, then why were capital improvement funds used to remodel the CAC building? Question number 1. Question number 2.
You want to stop and get an answer on the first one?
Sure.
My understanding is that both capital improvement funds for the new construction were used, and asset replacement funds were used for the remodeling portion, because both actions took place. We remodeled 7,000 square feet. We added 5,000 square feet.
Okay, I still want an answer to the must versus should, and perhaps Carrie can get that to me at a later time.
Thank you.
With respect to my second question, I have heard that we have many projects that have been in need of repair. One gentleman said for 4 years since he's moved here. The West Rec Center, the East Rec Center, the Burger Center, and we've done nothing with that. I can appreciate a volunteer board. I ran for the board. The point of my question is, I also heard that we don't have modern bylaws or modern CCRs. Yet Malcolm Manuel who is currently the attorney for the board, or for the OVA, has been the attorney for quite some time. I moved here in 2007. Why is it that we don't have modern bylaws and modern CC&Rs that give us, the paying members of this community, the right to vote on these kinds of major expenditures of monies that are here to improve and create facilities, recreational facilities that we all moved here to enjoy in our retirement? That should be point number one of focus for the board, and that is to take care of what is in front of them now for 3,500 to 4,500 residents, rather than focusing on 6 employees.
Last one, Wally.
Wally Schultz, Belhaven Court. I don't have a question, but I wanted to talk to a couple of you people, including this last person. Our articles of incorporation and our bylaws can only be changed according to the articles of incorporation and bylaws. It requires a 70% approval of any change of anything we want to do, and that's approval of 70% of the owners of Oakmont. Not a majority, not 70% of those who vote, but 70% of all of the owners. We cannot get 70% of the people here to vote on anything in total, much less approve something at the 70% rate.
How do you know? Have we ever tried
10
it?
years ago, I rang 800 doorbells. We had 3 or 4 other people that did similar things to try to change one of our articles of incorporation. And that was the article that speaks to changing the articles. At that time, we had to have 70% approval of each of the separate, and I think there are 54 separate, there are 34 something HOAs, and the rest of us who are not in HOAs are actually in a subdivision, which is printed on the copy of your CC&Rs. And Mr. Berger handed those out willy-nilly. We own our own home. We're not in an HOA, but we are in one of the 56 subdivisions in this unit, in this property. And we have a problem there, because these said that in order to change our articles of incorporation, our CC&Rs would have to have a 70% approval in each of those 56 subdivisions. Can you imagine trying to get that? It took us almost 4 years of ringing doorbells and sending registered letters to out-of-state, out-of-town, out-of-country owners to get a 70% to approve making that one little change to where now we no longer need 70% of 56 different separate units in Oakmont. We now only need 70% of all of the owners. And if you think you can change our bylaws, good luck.
Oh, we can't.
Just cannot be done because we can't get enough people to vote.
Oh, you
So
can.
that is an argument just plain confused.
Well, I guess not only the problem is how do we spend money, but how do we manage the management of the association. But we've tried to provide as clear and extensive a perspective as we could. I hope you'll find it beneficial, and we'll look forward to your additional input. Have a good weekend.